Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of X's and O's Reloaded. I'm Isaac Dienison alongside Joe Thompson. Later in the show, we'll be unveiling a new segment where we go back and take a look at our past takes and see where we might have went wrong or if we were possibly right. That'll be coming up later in the show. But for the moment, we're going to be spending the first half of this show talking about football-related topics as the NFL draft is tomorrow. But first, we're going to be talking about a Faro connection. Former NDSU quarterback Carson Wentz has been getting some negative attention recently from former Philadelphia Eagles quarterback Donovan McNabb.
Not a good look.
Donovan McNabb pretty much called him out last weekend and basically said if Carson Wentz cannot make the second round or get past the second round of the playoffs, rather, if he cannot do that in the next 2 years, he's suggesting the Philadelphia Eagles move on from Wentz and get a new quarterback. So let's just dive right into this. So that's a very interesting comment to be made by a former Eagles quarterback. Mm-hmm. Is this really a big deal? And are these comments from McNabb warranted?
I don't think that these comments from McNabb are warranted because Carson Wentz, he's only been in the NFL for 3-4 seasons now. So he's got plenty of time to fully develop. He had the great second year. He was iffy this past season because he was still dealing with some injury stuff. And overall, just Nick Foles really was the quarterback to lead the Eagles back into the playoffs. But I think when you look at the NFL, it's a team game. You can't just rely on the quarterback. If the Eagles don't make say what Donovan McNabb says, it's like if the Eagles don't make it past the second round the next 2 seasons, could it be Carson's fault? Yes, but it could also be defense. It could be the kicker missing a field goal. It could be a late fumble by the running back. There's just so many different factors that play into it that you can't just blame it all on the quarterback. The NFL is a team game, and I don't think those comments are totally warranted.
So we know from Carson Wentz's demeanor in interviews and what he exhibited here at NDSU, though we weren't around specifically for the time that he was on campus when he played football here, but nonetheless, he seems pretty even keel and nicely mannered. So really, when you take that into account and hearing these comments from Donovan McNabb that could be, definitely damaging for other people in this league, how do you think Carson Wentz will end up responding on the field this season to those comments?
I think he'll have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. Not a huge chip because he doesn't really care about what people really say about him. He knows that he has what it takes to be a good quarterback in the NFL. I think that will fuel him to prove Donovan McNabb wrong. I don't know if he'll go back to the near MVP form he was in 2017, but I think there's a good chance for him to step up and really become the Pro Bowl quarterback that the rest of the NFL thinks he can be.
He was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL at the time of his ACL injury in his second year in the league. So taking that into account, then how might the Eagles as a team then do this season, given that regardless of who the quarterback is, usually most teams tend to rally around the guy that they have under center. They've done it the last couple of years with Nick Foles. Hopefully, then the expectation is for Carson Wentz to complete a full season as a top-level quarterback. So how do you think the Eagles might do as they're likely going to rally around Wentz this year?
Well, as they've been doing the last couple seasons, they've been reloading. They got Jordan Howard in the offseason via trade.
Big trade. Mm-hmm.
Big trade. The defense is still one of the best defenses in the NFL. They still have great corners, great pass rushers, Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox. It's just really talented overall. So you expect them to make the playoffs. It'll be really interesting to see how the season goes because you can't totally predict the future before they've even played a preseason game.
And before the drafts even happen, they don't have the new rookies in yet.
They should still be contenders for a Super Bowl for a very long time. They have the talent. They have the experience. Carson Wentz, although he hasn't played in the NFL playoffs, he won 5 FCS national championships.
On the roster,
was the quarterback for a couple of those championship games. So
he came back from an injury to play in the 2015 season championship game and played really well against Jacksonville State that year.
So he has playoff experience. He knows what it takes to win. I think although the NFL is a different level than the FCS playoffs, I think he'll do just
100%. That's fair enough. So then, speaking of Bison players in the NFL draft once again is tomorrow night, and it'll at least be starting tomorrow night with the first round. But NDSU is going to likely send a couple players to the draft this year, but there are not going to, barring a tremendous turn of events, NDSU players will likely not be drafted in the first round tomorrow night. But there are a couple players that could be getting their names called during the draft at some point in time. So, and these might be later in the draft, but let's just kind of spitball a little bit. Who among these graduating seniors that the Bison had on this last year's championship team, they had over 20, I believe, seniors graduate from the team last year.
24, I believe.
That sounds right to me. So who from that group do you think has the best chance of getting drafted?
I think the two obvious choices, I think you'll agree with me in this, are Easton Stick and Bruce Anderson.
Yeah.
I think those are the two obvious choices, but I think
agree.
that the other players on this team that could be under the radar are guys like Lance Dunn, Robbie Grimsley,
Darius Shepard. Darius Shepard was really good at NDSU's pro day. Now, granted, he had Easton Stick throwing to him, his college roommate, so that definitely helps. But yeah, I think Darius Shepard could be an option.
Yeah. Lance Dunn has been a really big catalyst for this team the last 3 seasons. He's been a huge part of that offense. He's basically been a 1-2 punch with Bruce Anderson, with Ty Brooks coming in there on big plays when he needs to. But I think those are the main guys you could see potentially get drafted.
So those are the potential that could get drafted. Now, it's not a guarantee that, really even, maybe outside of Anderson and Stick, it's probably not a guarantee that the others will get drafted. So is it fair to say that there'll be priority undrafted free agents?
I think that's 100% fair to say, because they have been talented. They are just extremely talented. Robbie Grimsley has been one of the best safeties in the FCS since he became a starter.
Which was his freshman year. Yep.
But he really had a coming out party in his junior and senior year when he really took over. He was learning from Trey Dempsey. I think those guys, Robbie Grimsley, Lance Dunn, I think they're not guaranteed UDFAs, but I think they have a really good shot at joining an NFL team at some point.
All right, so with most of these guys that are projected to go into the NFL draft, they may not exactly be drafted. They're projected to be undrafted free agents. So taking all that into account with what we just said, with the players we just discussed, how productive might these guys be if they get to the NFL once they get signed to teams?
Well, it all depends on which team signs them. When you look at a guy like Robbie Grimsley, yes, he's primarily a safety, but he could play linebacker if he beefed up and really was willing to become a linebacker. When you look at guys like Darius Shepard, Lance Dunn, Bruce Anderson, if he doesn't get drafted, you really don't see them making a switch to a different position, really, because it's really hard for a running back to convert to a wide receiver unless they have really, really good catching abilities. So when looking at that production-wise, it kind of depends on where they go. If a team needs a running back, I think guys like Lance Dunn could fill a role. Darius Shepard, if they need
or at least to fill a spot in camp, if anything.
Fill a spot on the practice squad. If they're lucky, make a 53-man roster. But I see a guy like Robbie Grimsley. I think if he needed to convert to linebacker to make a team, I think he'd be more than happy to do that.
So then, how about Easton Stick then? Because, he had a pretty successful career here, and he's getting some draft looks. Specifically, I read an article from the Philadelphia Inquirer. The Philadelphia Eagles could be potentially interested in Easton Stick. So I won't ask you exactly where Easton Stick's going to be drafted, since it's going to be late in the draft, and every team will have passed on him at that point. But how productive do you think that Easton Stick could be in this league, possibly?
Well, kind of going off the same question, it really depends on where he gets drafted. I think it's definitely plausible that he could go to Carson Wentz. They run a style that's fitted for Carson Wentz and a guy like Easton Stick, since they ran basically the same schemes when they were in college.
Given they both played.
Mm-hmm. And looking at some other teams, they could run a similar style to the Eagles. So it could work out for a number of different teams. It depends on who takes him, if he gets drafted or whether he's an undrafted free agent. But I think it all depends on where he gets taken.
Be sure to tune in on Saturday. That'll likely be the day that NDSU players are most likely to get drafted. When we come back, we'll be unveiling a new segment that we're going to likely call What Did We Say? That's the working title that we have. We'll be unveiling that for you when we come back.
The NDSU Bookstore, where every true fan and alum goes to get their pride on. Gear up with a variety of high-quality t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, and more. Made by top-of-the-line brands like Under Armour, Nike, and CI Sport to help you show off your Bison pride. The NDSU Bookstore has everything you need in your two favorite colors, green and gold.
I remember the moment
I'll never forget that moment.
that changed my life.
At that moment, it hit me. This is why I joined the Guard. We're soldiers, always ready to protect our country. But we've also got communities. Family, friends, neighbors who count on us. I couldn't believe it. I just saved a life. Somebody from my hometown.
See what it means to be a citizen soldier at NationalGuard.com.
Alrighty, welcome back to X's and O's, and this is that segment that we teased before the commercial break. It's called What Did We Say? And this is where we're going to be going back on some of the things we've said in prior shows and seeing how well they've held up or how not so well they've held up in some of these cases. So we're going to be going back 2 weeks, 2 shows ago, to when we initially were looking at the NHL playoff bracket and made some initial Stanley Cup final predictions. And, well, let's just let the tape speak for itself. Let's roll tape.
I think the series that we could see, the one that I want to see personally, is Tampa Bay versus Nashville. I think that would be a very competitive.
Okay.
Both teams are just oozing talent. Tampa Bay, they got Steven Stamkos, Nikita Kucherov, Andrei Vasilevsky. And then Nashville, they got wildly veterans with PK Subban leading the charge, and they just got loads and loads of talent. Still Pekka Rinne, still a solid goaltender after all these years. So those are the 2 teams that I would really like to see play for Lord Stanley.
So I would almost be inclined to think that the Washington Capitals will take the East, and the Nashville Predators will return to the West, will return to the team. Will return to the Stanley Cup Finals, rather. Very much excuse me on that one, as they will be both competing as recent attendees in the Stanley Cup Finals. Yeah, very much excuse both of us indeed on those predictions. Now, granted, my prediction is not completely dead yet, although Washington at home in a Game 7 against Carolina that showed a lot of spunk in their Game 6 win. They could be in danger potentially, but I'm very sorry, Joe, that we were just kind of and I guess really sorry for both of us. We both believed in the Nashville Predators, but
they were getting hyped up just as the playoffs are getting started. Like Nashville is gonna tear through the Stars because the Stars barely squeaked into the playoffs.
Dallas has not been a factor among the NHL's playoff landscape for over a decade. So big oversight on both of our parts there. So that didn't work out for us.
The Lightning one was the one that really killed me.
And we talked about that in our show last week. You can feel free to watch that. Moving on, then we'll be we also last week in that show we did last week, we talked a lot about the NHL and NBA playoffs. We're going to first dive into our take from last week on the Nashville Predators and the Winnipeg Jets and how they would fare in their series at that time. Let's roll tape. But Nashville's one of my Stanley Cup Finals predictions, so hopefully they don't lose in Game 4 to make this series tied. But otherwise, I still am a firm believer in Nashville's roster over Dallas at this point.
You got the Winnipeg Jets versus the St. Louis Blues. That series is tied up 2-2.
Road teams won every game so far, and now the Jets have home ice advantage again. I really do like what Jordan Binnington's done for the Blues so far in this series, but I think overall, when it comes down to it, Winnipeg's talent's going to be too much for them. Yeah, spoiler alert, Nashville lost big in that Game 4, and then they would lose in Game 6 on the road. They would never win a game in that series after that episode aired, and also nor would the Winnipeg Jets in their series. Jaden Schwartz just turned into Wayne Gretzky 2.0 in their last couple games with that late winning goal. So I was definitely wrong, and I think we both probably were not expecting both of those teams to lose the way they did. Mm-hmm. They were supposed to meet up in the second round, but it's their adversaries winning. What do you think about my incredibly bold predictions there?
Honestly, I just think that's a strong case of the butterfly effect. You say one thing, and then something else happens that just goes horribly wrong. But I think the biggest thing we have to look at with the Winnipeg Jets, it's another year, another Canadian NHL team not having a chance to win the Stanley Cup. That hasn't happened since the 93 or 94 Canadians.
93.
93?
Or something like that. Whatever the team was that beat Gretzky's Kings.
Yeah. I think it was 93 then.
Something like that. That sounds right.
Another year, another Canadian team not in the Stanley Cup Finals. You just hate to see it.
And none can win after the Toronto Maple Leafs lost in their Game 7 of the Boston Bruins. The next take that we'll be looking at is also from last week, and it's another pretty bold one that both of us kind of bought into concerning the Vegas Golden Knights and the San Jose Sharks series. Let's roll tape.
The last series before we go to break is the San Jose Sharks versus the Vegas Golden Knights. Vegas is leading this series as well. I think looking at the Vegas Golden Knights, they went to the Stanley Cup Finals last year after people were expecting them to not even be anywhere near the playoffs last year. They went a Cinderella run, and leading in this series as of right now, I think it's really cool to see that their playoff run last year wasn't exactly a fluke.
Marc-Andre Fleury's been outstanding so far for the Golden Knights. They should beat the Sharks, even though the Sharks probably have more talent on paper.
Yeah.
I really think that they should be probably favorites if they were to move on and take on the winner of that Flames Avalanche series, given that they have that playoff experience from last year on that roster.
It's just going to be a little bit disappointing for the Sharks with yet another playoff failure.
Okay, hand up. I think we both just completely overlooked the San Jose Sharks in every conceivable way because, again, it's another situation after we talk about Vegas and that series, them being up 3-1 at the time, they don't win a single game in that series going forward.
Just
amazing.
But I feel like we had good reason to write off the Sharks, though, because they had been in how many times in this situation? Countless times of just having loads of talent on their team, contending for they're still Stanley Cup contenders, I see, I think in my eyes. But they just fail every single year. So why wouldn't we think that? And then lo and behold, 5-minute major, 4 goals during that 5-minute major in Game 7. And then at the very end of overtime, some pretty terrible defense, in my opinion, by the Vegas Golden Knights led to a gimme goal for the Sharks to send them on to the second round.
Yeah, oh my gosh, just it was one of them. Like seeing the result of that game unfold in front of me. Oh man, just unbelievable. Just these shots that San Jose's getting on the power play, they just keep going in and going in and going in. It's unbelievable that was able to happen, and that just completely bold assumption that Vegas, I after that, when that episode released, I was actually convinced that they were just going to go back. At that point, even though I still had Nashville in the Stanley Cup Finals, I would not have been shocked. I would not have been shocked at all if Vegas did it. But both of us were completely wrong. So then the last take that we'll be going through on this segment of What Did We Say? It'll be on the Portland versus Oklahoma City NBA first-round series mostly concerning Russell Westbrook and the Oklahoma City Thunder. Let's roll that one.
I think that's one of the biggest things you have to look at when you look back on Russell Westbrook's career when it's all done. The averaging triple-doubles and all the triple-double records is right.
It's cool.
But when you look deeper into it, his shooting percentage is just abysmal. He has to shoot like 40 times a game just to get to 20 points. And then his teammates let him get the rebounds, and then he passes when he wants to, and that's how he gets his triple-doubles. They look great. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, but when you look back on it, those shooting percentages are just not as pretty as they should be for a superstar point guard in Russell Westbrook. And then also the fact that he can't make it past the first round since Kevin Durant left for the Golden State Warriors.
It's not happened so far.
It hasn't happened so far.
It's
and
not looking like
he's not
so
getting
far,
any younger.
It's not looking like it's going to happen this year.
No.
And emphatically, the Oklahoma City Thunder did not make it past the first round this season. If we could have our producers in the back room possibly change the back screen behind us to
There we go.
illustrate the point.
Yes.
That's Damian Lillard right there. And if you are not aware, he made an unbelievable dagger three in Paul George's
From
face.
the parking lot, basically.
About to win the series for Portland in Game 5.
Not only that, but he dropped 50 points in that game. Damian Lillard is so unbelievable in the clutch when it comes to the playoffs and elimination games.
So that was a take that we were pretty much, or at least you were the one giving that take in the clip there, but I kind of held the same belief. We were kind of right on that one.
Yeah.
And so at least we have one thing that we have happy to
Yeah.
report on. But nonetheless, let's kind of take this discussion a little bit further about Russell Westbrook and just that his team was not able to get it done this year. What do you say about that right now? What's your opening statement on this topic?
I think the Thunder are talented. Let's not take anything away from the Oklahoma City Thunder. They have loads of talent. Russell Westbrook is a Hall of Famer. Paul George is one of the best players of this decade, I feel. He's been a multi-time All-Star. He came back from that gruesome leg injury for a few years ago and has arguably gotten better since coming back from that injury. But I think one of the biggest things you have to look at is Russell Westbrook is not a team player. He has proved when Kevin Durant first went down with that leg injury in, I believe, 2014-ish? 2014,
or
2015?
so, something like that.
Russell Westbrook got a taste of what it's like to be the man. He was getting a lot of triple-doubles. He was in the running for MVP at the end of the season. The Thunder did not make the playoffs.
Yep.
But once Russell Westbrook got a taste of that, he wanted nothing to do with Kevin Durant after that point. They have been butting heads. When you have two first options on your team that can't coexist,
Two alpha males.
it's not going to work. Although Oklahoma City is more talented and probably should have went to at least one more NBA Finals with Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant, once Kevin Durant left for Golden State, Russell Westbrook became the man, and it was no longer about him winning a championship. It was all about him sticking it to Kevin Durant, averaging triple-doubles, breaking the record for triple-doubles in a season, breaking Oscar Robertson's record. But while he was doing that, he forgot about the team. It became about Russell Westbrook.
And you can just see that by his shot selection in some of these games. He only shot, I think, 32% from downtown in their playoff series against Portland.
Yeah, we were looking at one of the stats in one of the games. I believe he shot 5 of 21 from the field.
And 0 for 7 in the second half.
Terrible.
It's not good. It's just not good, bar none, not good.
Yeah. So as great of a player as Russell Westbrook is, it's just really, it's painful that he just can't, he puts himself before his teammates. Teammates let him get the rebound so he can get his triple-doubles. He passes it when he wants to, and then he'll just take shot after shot after shot and just brick. He has the nickname among NBA Twitter, Russell Westbrick, for a reason.
100%. Absolutely. So that concludes this What Did We Say segment, and let's just kind of wrap this up here at the end. Let's just kind of discuss generally about the other happenings in the NHL and NBA that we didn't discuss with those videos. So last night there were 2 NHL Game 7s, Toronto, Boston, and that Sharks Vegas Golden Knights game that we already discussed about. So how about, Boston moving on? They're going to be playing against Columbus in the second round.
Yeah.
What do you think about that matchup that was absolutely 100% expected by literally everybody.
Yeah.
Said no one ever. But what do you think about that? Columbus getting all that time off after they beat Tampa,
Yeah.
playing against a Boston team that just went 7 against Toronto.
But before I get into that series, I just want to go for the fact that the Toronto Maple Leafs are basically in the movie Groundhog Day, where they just keep losing in Game 7s to the Boston Bruins in Boston over and over and over and over again. It happened in 2013, happened a couple seasons ago, and it happened now.
You want to finish that problem? Finish better than Boston in the
Finish
standings,
better than Boston,
Toronto.
and then you'll beat a team other than Boston, or just beat Boston.
I like you, Toronto. Do something.
Just do something for your fans' sake. But looking into this series, I think usually when you think of playoff series, the team that has a lot of rest is going to go in there confident, and there have been many cases where that team gets slapped in the face, punched in the mouth, and they end up losing pretty bad. Usually you see that when a team goes into NBA Finals and they're hot, they've had plenty of rest. World Series, the same thing. But I think the Columbus Blue Jackets, after winning their first playoff series as a franchise, I think they're looking to come in with a big chip on their shoulder. They're looking at a Titan team such as the Boston Bruins, a staple of the NHL, original 6. They're looking to punch them in the mouth Game 1. I think it'll be a competitive series overall, but I don't think that Columbus has enough talent to compete with the talent that Boston has. I think they'll win a couple games. Ultimately, I see Boston winning this one in 6.
Fair enough. And then moving on then to the NHL's Western Conference, the Colorado Avalanche. Big surprise as well in their first-round playoff series against the Calgary Flames. You know, they're moving on to the second round for the first time in quite some time. That was a big deal for them. Also with the NBA, we're gonna shift gears quickly to the NBA before we wrap this up completely. The NBA, we said in our show last week that, you know, even before some series were 2 games old, that this was going to be a really competitive first round, and
Nope.
It's not looking like most series.
We could have included that in the last segment.
Possibly,
really
I
wanted to.
debated it, but then we could have, maybe run a little bit long. We might be running long on this as we speak right now, but nonetheless, I think it might be a foregone conclusion right now, even with tonight's games going on. Only really Denver versus San Antonio, like I predicted, was going to be a really competitive series. That's going to be the only one that's going to even go 6 games when all is said and done. So
Bucks swept the Pistons, but that was
duh.
almost guaranteed. The Nets surprised us Game 1, but Philadelphia, they got punched in the mouth Game 1, got back up, punched them right back.
Yep.
Specifically, they punched Jared Dudley right back, quite literally. And then just the rest of the series is played out as we expected. Golden State's been taking it to the Clippers after that first game.
Well, but now at the same time, now that this first round is almost over, I think we almost get the real playoffs coming up because
now it's going to get more competitive.
Certainly it would have been nice to see these upsets happen, but at the same time, if they did happen, we got a really good second round lined up for us that we might not have had if those higher seeds lost. So what do you think now as we're shifting from the first to the second round? What do you think is going to happen now that we've seen what we've seen?
I think it's going to really come down to what team are going to show up. You got Portland's going to be on a hot streak coming in to the second round. The Bucks, after just brushing by the Pistons, they're going to prove that even though they have injuries going on right now, they still have Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's basically unguardable. And then got teams like Golden State saying we're still here, we're still in the current midst of a dynasty, and we're not going anywhere. We're going to make some noise. This is the big chance for the Raptors to make some noise and get past the second round now that they don't have to worry about LeBron James. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens within the next few days.
Fair enough. So that's going to conclude this week's episode of X's and O's. Be sure to tune in next week. We'll be having our last show of this spring semester before we transition into the summer. Next week, we'll be talking about some NFL drafts that we personally liked or disliked. We'll also likely have updates on the Bison players that might end up getting drafted or signing to teams. And we'll also be talking about the second rounds in both the NBA and the NHL yet again. So that's once again going to conclude it for this week. I'm Isaac Dienison.
I'm Joe Thompson.
And we will see you next week.